Okay, I think we'll go ahead and start. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Intuit Developer Friday morning Hangout. My name is Jimmy Wong, and I'll be filling in this week for David Leary, who's out. I'm an Intuit Developer Evangelist, and with me this week is the API documentation team. We have Patty Hare, Shawn, Magee, and George Rawlins. So I'm very excited to have them on. Before we get started, I have a couple announcements. For those of you who don't know, the Small Business App Showdown, the 100K Small Business App Showdown is happening right now. It's your opportunity to win $100,000 just for creating a small business application. Now, how does it work? First off, you have to have a small business app. You integrate your app with QuickBooks Online, and then you publish your app on apps.com. And of course, you sign up for the contest. And once you're in the contest, make sure you promote your app and get the most votes as you can. And then at the end, the top 10 vote getters get invited to QuickBooks Connect, where they get to pitch their apps in front of a very large audience. And then we announce the winner there. Speaking of QuickBooks Connect, it'll be happening this year from November 15th through the 17th, again in San Jose. It's a unique conference where we put together developers, accountants, and small business owners. Okay, for more events or information about events that we have coming up, please check out developer.intuit.com/hub/events. Okay, and with all that, let's talk to our docs team. Hey, George, I believe we have some new updates to the SDKs. Do you want to tell us more about them?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Jimmy. We have quite a bit of new features in the SDK docs. I guess for starters, sort of the design changes we've made into these docs over the last several months. One is a kind of a more tabular look on some of the overview pages. Let me actually share the screen. Do you see that?
Yep, looks good.
Yeah. So here we have the new design of the overview, which is much easier to find what you're looking for as far as moving down into the the more detailed areas of the documentation. We've also carried that over into our sample apps and third-party tools. And on all these pages, there's lots more information here to be found about more tools added, more sample code, more sample apps that are available. Maybe the biggest change we've made in this documentation is for the quick starts. And these quick starts give you a front to back, beginning to end, as much as possible through the typical dev process. So for .NET, we have moving you through the preliminaries, installation, known issues, release notes, but then taking you down through through each step of your dev process. So this goes through configuration, using the class libraries, and then the details of making API calls, including configuring your authorization, how to use request IDs, and typical things you're likely going to want to create, such as invoices, creating customers, and there's sample code snippets for all of these. So this is your typical, what you're likely going to want to do for most of your applications. We've also added more details on sample apps and sample code. So we now have CRUD samples for all three SDKs, and we have direct links in the sample app pages. So here we have .NET, and we have a link here into the repo. examples for each of these API calls. And we also have an easy link here to get you to the API reference, which has the details on these are what these SDK APIs are wrapping. So you can see here, these are the parameters for your SDK calls.
So George, those the snippets that you're showing earlier, does that belong to a master, I guess, sample app? Is that how those work? Not the snip. Sorry, the sample code you showed earlier, not the snippets.
Oh, in the quick start?
No, you had clicked over. Looked like it was a GitHub repo.
Right. So these are actual examples of how to do basic CRUD examples, right? So how to create an object, how to update. So these are examples for each.
Okay. So if a developer, like say, wanted to run this, he can basically just clone this project and then run it on his computer, then, right?
Right. Exactly. Yes. So we have these for Java and .NET as well, and PHP. So here again, same thing. Here we have all the Java. Here's the sample code for create an object. In this case, create a deposit object. So let's see the quick starts, sample apps. We are going to be implementing a linking from the API reference to CRUD samples, so that will make the linking easier between what we have defined in the API references to how you implement that in each of the different languages in the SDKs. So that's something we'll be starting pretty soon. Most of the new changes are in PHP. And for people who are familiar with the docs, for a while, there's a lot more in each of these SDKs than there used to be, especially PHP, which has just a lot more information here available. We also have this quick start, which is pretty recent. This quick start in this form has just been here a month or two. And we also now have code snippets and CRUD samples as well. One big change for PHP is that the 3.x version is completely changed from 2.6. So for PHP, now parameters are entered as an array, and they correspond to the API reference, unlike the other two SDKs. So that's been a big change. So right now we have kind of a combined 3.x and 2.6, which will be changing. I think we'll likely break this off into a whole new doc set because 3.0 is so radically different from the SDK 2.6.
So will we have a separate 2.6 and 3.0 doc set then, completely separate from each other?
I think we'll be doing that, yeah, very soon. Because right now it's combined, but it's becoming more and more divergent. So I think probably the best thing we'll be doing will be to break that off into two. We're only developing in 3.x now. So I mean, as far as I think 2.6, there's really be no reason to stay in there. If you can migrate to 3.x, that would be the best thing to do. And here is a migration path. Let's see what else. All the SDKs are all now open source, and we have links to all these repositories. And what else is of interest? A PHP installation is now uses Composer, which greatly simplifies your installation, which used to be very complex with the 2.6, but much easier with now 3.x with open source and Composer install.
How much easy, like what's the difference? Like what does Composer do? Is it just a one-click process or what?
Maybe more than one click, but a few clicks versus 20. 20 steps. I mean, installing in PHP was pretty complex before in 2.6.
Hmm.
So let's see, we can take a look at the install here. Here's the 3.x install, and that's pretty straightforward versus 2.6, which was quite a bit more complex. Just the nature of PHP made that much more complex. The different frameworks and just a lot of specific details you had to account for in that installation, which pretty much go away with installing in 3. Let's see.
So I noticed on the drop down there, we have quick start, install the PHP SDK, sample apps. For like a new developer, do you recommend that they just kind of go down that progression? Is that meant to be kind of like an order, or was it just...
Absolutely. Yeah, this is meant to be, to really the quick start is where you should start, and that should take you down through the basics of developing and using PHP. So yeah, these are meant. Each of these, the quick start has links into these other more detailed pages. So if you need to configure, this will take you to configuration details. And pretty much all the way down through. So everybody will want to will go through in a similar path, at least for the beginning. You'll want to install, you want to configure. You can test your, set up your OAuth, test your OAuth settings, and then you're gonna want to use the class library for whatever you want to implement. Beyond the quick start, the references here for maybe less typical implementations. But yeah, details about what to remember when you're using the SDK. These are request IDs, and just using. And here the paradigm for making calls using arrays now. So that is different from if you're using 2.6, you want to go to 3.x. The biggest change is going to be all of your create and update calls will be using a JSON array, as we have in the API reference. So we're not using wrappers anymore here.
Oh, that's actually really nice because the syntax is very similar to what we see in the API reference, right?
Yeah, exactly. It matches up. Pretty much exactly, yeah. So JSON arrays for calls and also for authentication. So let's see where. Yeah. So here. Yeah, this describes the authorization for version 3, which you can see is an array. Passing the auth information as an array now.
Very nice.
So I think that's pretty much the highlights for the SDKs.
Okay. And was there anything? Did you want to tell us more about the sample apps, or is that everything we had to know about them? That was new release.
I think that's the. I think that's the basic description of that. If anybody has any questions about the sample apps, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Absolutely, yeah. If anybody has any questions, feel free to type them into the Q&A, and I'll make sure your questions are answered. Okay, awesome. Thanks, George. Hey, Patty, I heard we had some updates to the dev guide templates. Do you want to maybe show us a demo of that?
Yeah, Jimmy, let me show you that and a few more things that I've been busy doing. My name is Patty, for those of you out there, and I work a lot on the accounting API, associate and OAuth documentation. I'm getting my screen set up here. Okay. So let me go over to the dev guides, start with that. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. So we have done some reorganization of dev guides and topics that used to be in the dev guides section. I'll get to that in a minute. And we have repurposed them to be more of use case scenarios and put them in a little bit better order of the in the order that you might need them in your integration. And we've also standardized on the look and feel of them. So right off the bat, in the beginning of each dev guide is a little explanation over here, the workflows that you will encounter in this dev guide, what you should be getting, what you'll learn after going through the tutorial, what your prerequisites are, what you need to have ready, both knowledge, your own personal knowledge, and anything else like a sandbox, any specific data in the sandbox you'll need, what resources this tutorial or dev guide will cover, and then any pointers to more in-depth knowledge that you might, in case you might want to learn a little bit more about what's going on, like here's a pointer to the Invoice API reference guide. So every dev guide starts out with this structure, so you can get a quick overview of if it's going to give you the information you're looking for, and then follows the particular content, and that is trying to get that a little bit standardized, but per dev guide it might vary a little bit based on the content and the nature of what we're trying to convey. Now, further to that, we've divided up I'll say a couple months ago, the set of dev guides we used to publish, pulled some of them out that were more germane to actually using the API. And we call that a programming guide. And starting out with the REST API quick reference, which is just a listing. Up here's the topics covered of what you need, what to have handy on what you need for, let's say, querying the database, or what a realm ID is. And then further to that, the different topics, again, maybe in the order that you need them in.
So Patty, those links in the quick reference, those are just, if you click on them, they give you a definition of each one of those. Is that what
No,
that is?
it just goes down to the part of the manual in that page. So for instance, this is everything you should need to know about the authorization header for your OAuth requests, and what each field means. Goes really in depth into what you need and how to construct that header. Go back up to the top here. So they're just links down deeper into the content. So anyway, so it's hoping that pulling this programming reference material out will make it a more streamlined experience using our API. The other thing I wanted to showcase was over in the essentials and using OAuth. And figuring out what workflows a developer needs to use based on what publishing model he has chosen. And this is hoped to fill in some gaps to make it easier for the developer to know exactly what he needs to do. With 3 choices here of a publishing model, listing on the apps with Intuit single sign-on enabled, listed on App Store with Intuit single sign-on disabled. We used to call that as a referral app. And the third model is not listed on the App Store at all. That would be more of a private publication, limited access. And then here, exactly what steps you need to go with links to the down into the topics. So that's the news on my front. Back to you, Jimmy.
So I think we often get a lot of questions on making queries when we're doing searches. Do you want to just run through that real quick? I think we were looking at that in the dev guide earlier.
Sure. Let's see. I can't. I'm embarrassed. I can't remember where we put that. I think we put it here. Data queries. So this is the content in this page is everything you need to know for a query. Starts out with right at the top here the URI in case that's all you need to trigger memory. It's right here at the beginning. And what the request and the response looks like.
Mm-hmm. Do we tell them what commands they have or in the queries? Oh, that like right there.
Yeah, we give you some examples of different queries, different use cases you might need to use. And at the end here, pagination count is the complete syntax for the select statement and what we support.
Yeah, that's really helpful, I think. A lot of folks, at least when I first started using these things, I had to kind of like guess what was available to me. So this is very helpful.
Yep. And yeah. So and I want to point out that our SQL language is a subset of full-blown SQL. For instance, projections aren't supported. Things like that. So, yep. This should
Excellent.
provide a lot of information for the developer.
All right, we got a question from Kevin Anderson. He said he found it fairly easy to find REST details, but a hard time finding specifics around things like query service, like what we were talking about, and report service, so and how they work. And he's asking if there's a section for that. So we looked at query service. What about report service?
Run reports. Here is a dev guide about running reports. With a quick summary of what's available. And these link into the actual API reference guide for each report to give you the specific details about the endpoint call, details about what the report format looks like, return for each individual report. And then later on in this article is a general discussion of what the report response looks like and how it relates to what you see in the GUI. It's
yes, the famous rows and columns.
Yes, recursive rows and columns. As you can see here, how much indentation there is on the projection that the UI gives, and then how we organize that over here in the response from the API. A lot of nesting.
Do we have a table of the different options that we have for running reports? Like, say, for example, like running a accrual versus accounting basis?
Well, up here is the inventory of report that we have.
Uh-huh.
Is that what you're asking?
Yeah. Yeah. So if we click into it, does it show like what we have? Like what does it show when you click into that?
Okay, let's say profit and loss. It'll go over to the API reference guide and give you a some information
Oh, excellent.
about the report, and then give you the report object, what to expect. These can get kind of long. And then the report format, you can click into these, you can see all the nesting levels of how the report response payload is constructed. Sample query on the endpoint, and the query parameters that you can add
Oh,
to your endpoint.
Very helpful.
So, and this information is for each report that we support, which is also they're grouped here in report resources within the API reference guide.
Cool. Thanks, Hattie. Looks like we have a question from Xperia Z5 Dual. This question is, from where to start of API integration with e-commerce web app built in Java? I think he's asking if he's going to build a web app in Java, where should he start?
Well, where is that? We have a dev guide. Someone might have to help me remember where we put it.
I think George had gone over it earlier, right? Was
it in tools? There is a dev guide. Oh, here we go. Using accounting and payments together. This development guide, which hasn't been transferred over to the new template, takes the reader on a little journey of a e-commerce example, both from using the accounting API, making an invoice, sales receipt, things like that, and how you can also use our QuickBooks payments and how they merge into QuickBooks accounting data.
I think maybe a good place for him to start probably would be to play around with the Java SDK, right? Would that be the right place to begin? I know we have George showed us a quick start guide for that earlier, right?
Yeah, George, I let him speak for what enhancements he's given to the SDKs in this area.
Well, I think yeah, if you're creating a Java app, you using Java, you don't have to use the SDK, but it's recommended that you use the SDK, right? I mean,
yeah, it just makes life easier, right?
Yeah. So it would be recommended to use the SDK.
And the requests here are just gives you the raw endpoints and any parameters you need to specify with the request. And then it would be the way this is written right now, it's up to the reader then to apply this to his Java SDK code or .NET, whatever he's using. But this just gives you the raw endpoints and how they work.
Okay. Hope that answers.
It's language agnostic.
Yeah. Right. This is specific to the API call itself.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Patty.
Okay.
Hey, Shawn. Hey, what can you tell us about the new AI flow? Can you give us a demo of it?
Well, I can walk you guys through the latest changes as far as recently we did some rework to the essentials in information architecture, trying to make things a bit more streamlined, make it a bit straightforward as far as how to follow the path of app creation, authentication, and choosing your model and that type of stuff. In addition, we recently reworked our actual app creation flow in the portal itself. So I'm kind of going to show both of those things simultaneously since they overlap a fair bit. So in the past, the essentials was divided into simply 4 different sections that kind of tended to bury a lot of information and make it a bit less clear as to how people should progress. In order to address that, we broke everything out into a much larger single section, but it's much clearer as far as, like, you know, you start out with creating an account if you don't already have one, and then get started on creating your app. As you see here, we also link again to the table that Patty mentioned previously, which helps users decide exactly which publication model they want to go through, whether it integrates with single sign-on, or whether it uses their own sign-on method, or if they're just going to privately publish and not worry about getting listed on apps.com at all. And so then it walks you through the various sections as far as doing your first request with API Explorer and SDK and Postman and the like. And a lot of this is information that wasn't necessarily created new, but it was a bit harder to find sometimes. So in this way, people can kind of walk start to finish as far as how they want to progress.
Yeah, that's really nice. So that's a lot like what George showed us earlier with the SDKs, and Patty was showing us. Like, you just kind of go from top to bottom. Is that pretty much going forward how we're going to organize things?
That's the general intent. Although I can't say that you should always go start to finish in this section, simply because, like, app creation is not always going to follow a linear path. And as I pointed out with the previous sections, when you determine exactly how your publication method is, which publication method you're going to follow, then the path kind of can diverge depending on if you're not following SSO, for example, then you get to divert away from some of that. So it's not exactly a linear path that we can walk people down step by step, but it's much more so than it was previously. And so with the new publication flow, we have it's been simplified a lot. So it used to be that users had to use development keys tab, they had a production keys tab, and it was a big mess on the interface. With this one, it's actually much simpler. So we've eliminated basically the 2 different tabs concept, and so it's a lot easier to present people that you can just get started with using your app with production keys. And also the app settings have been much simplified, so they're all housed on the same page. Each of them has a relatively simple description, and we walk you through how to follow each of them, which ones are required versus, you know, optional, and that type of thing as well. So that's the general idea behind all of these. The second thing I was going to look at was webhooks, which has been greatly updated since its original incarnation a few months back. And as people who are familiar with it may be able to notice, it's been broken out into multiple sections. It used to be that this page was just a single long scrolling page with a bunch of information on it. So now that we've greatly expanded the number of entities and operations that are supported. So we broke those out into their own page so people can quickly look through and see which entity as well as which operation each entity supports. So in this way, people can kind of quickly glance through and make sure that the one that they're particularly interested in is available and the operation that they want is also supported for it. When they're creating their app, they can still simply just select all webhooks operations and entities and be done with it, or you can piecemeal pick them out just with checkboxes. And then we broke out the secondary section for how the notifications and the payload works, just to make sure that it stands out a bit better. how to use the verifier to validate it and that type of thing. And then for the general webhooks page, now we just have it set to how you configure the webhooks themselves. And then just general best practices and references to the sample apps in case people need examples for them.
Oh, good to know. Yeah, that looks a lot easier. And this is under programming guide and under the.
It's under references and then the programming guide drop down. Yeah.
Okay.
So they used to be buried under dev guides, and it wasn't exactly the appropriate location for them. So anybody who had bookmarked that previous link gets automatically redirected to the new location. But this is at least a bit more of a logical destination for them.
Yeah, it makes sense. Well, cool. Thank you, Shawn. That was pretty much what we had to cover today. If the audience has any more questions, please go ahead and type in the Q&A panel. I think we'll just leave it as an open office hour between now and 10 o'clock. So we'll just hang out for the next 24 minutes. Hey, Shawn, looks like Jonathan Knapp has a question. He has a couple questions. I think this is regarding webhooks. Looks like he's testing a trial account, is not returning sales tax. I guess that's not really webhooks related, but I know we need to turn on sales tax, right, in order for that to be returned.
Yeah, I'm looking into his questions right now. The initial one was regarding different time zone settings and how they're labeled with the API reference material. So he pointed out that there are discrepancies between the different time zones used with webhooks versus with the general API. In general, our APIs stick with GMT for all time format related things. With webhooks, it's newer, so he pointed out that they use PST in some sections, and you have to actually do conversions back and forth. So my guess on that one is simply that it's a bit of a newer product, so to speak. So people didn't necessarily think to do it to our standardized GMT. But I need to check with the team and see exactly if there's any rationale behind that or not. And to be clear, yes, if we do change time zones on webhooks, that would absolutely be communicated to everybody via the webhooks release notes that we have. They weren't released with the initial iteration of webhooks, but it now has its own release notes in the release notes section. And it'll also be communicated via blog post and our other communication methods, because that would be a fairly significant change.
It's like for the question regarding the sales tax. Let me share my screen here. Hey, Jonathan, you may want to check out the section called Dev Guides, under Dev Guides, called Managed Sales Tax for either non-US locales or US locales, and it kind of tells you how you're able to turn that on. I don't believe that's turned on by default. So I highly recommend that you kind of go through this and check it out. Says, my concern is that a user will post transactions into. Yeah, Jonathan, I think Patty's right. I think you may want to contact support and get a definitive answer from them. Not sure if any of us will be able to help you out in your situation.
Hi.
Hello.
So I'm sorry to ask you strange questions here, but I thought it might be interesting to other people who might run into the same thing.
Yeah, I actually have. I've just been playing around writing an inventory tracking app myself, and I have not turned it off. So it's just been on by default for me. I'm actually looking at the docs to see if I can help you find an answer.
Well, my problem is my client says that he never turned inventory on, but items went over, became inventory items. Now he's got $25,000 of transactions in an inventory account, and how does he back that out? That's the. I did a support ticket on that question, but how would this happen? I would expect an error if I try to create an inventory item on a QBO account that has inventory turned off. I would expect to get an error back. Like you would if you manually try to do it, you get an error. You wouldn't let you do it.
Yeah, it seems like either something that's been missed or it's a bug, right? I mean, 'cause I remember being able to even track inventory on like something like a service. So I remember being able to do that, and I don't think that's right. Though I'm just trying to recall this from the top of my head. I may be wrong, but were you able to file a ticket against that?
I did a ticket on how to try to get him corrected, because he's got money in his chart of accounts on an account that he didn't want to be active at all. So I think it's hard to turn inventory off and it's hard to make. I think it's impossible to make inventory items non-inventory items. You have to make them inactive, and then you can create them again. But that's kind of ugly.
Mm. And what happens if you go into QuickBooks itself and turn it off, the UI? Was that?
Let's see. Let me do that. Let me try. Just log in. I got to do the two-factor identification.
Yeah, I'm logging into my Sandbox account too, just to see.
By the way, Sandbox accounts are not supposed to expire, right?
No.
Okay.
Did yours expire?
I had that experience like a year and a half ago, and then it seemed like it started working again. It was strange.
Hmm.
Well, apparently you can turn it off. Do I still have inventory items?
Do you see your inventory items?
Yeah, I still have inventory items, even though inventory is turned off.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
you got a kind of funny state there. You can get into,
Yeah, that is kind of funny.
and that's what I think happened. Is he never turned on inventory, but I pushed over a bunch of inventory.
Huh. He never turned it on. If I remember, maybe I'm wrong, but I think inventory tracking is turned on by default.
No,
No?
not on trial accounts.
On trial.
Well, wait a minute. I don't normally turn it on. But I don't know. Well, whatever. Maybe he didn't want it on, so he might have manually turned it off.
Mm.
I'm just not there. I didn't look at his account. I don't know, when he didn't have it on, or I haven't verified that. But I can see that you can have inventory items in an account that doesn't have. So I'm not sure now if I use that item in a transaction, what's going to happen.
Jonathan, are
Yeah.
you talking about Sandbox accounts?
No.
Okay, because Sandbox comes prepared or comes stocked with inventory items.
Yeah. Right.
Inventory's turned on. Okay.
I generally create a bunch of trials, and so I can test live with the app
Yeah. Of course. Yeah.
Yeah,
I've got it written down. It's interesting. I might have to adjust my dev guide and beef this up in this area a little bit. So I'm glad you brought it to our attention.
Well, one of the things I thought about this, and it seems like what I wanted wasn't there, but in the company info, I could do a query from company info, and maybe there's some new columns that weren't there when we built the interface. But can you check? I think I can check if inventory is turned on, but I don't think I can check. I'm not sure if one of those was not available, like sales tax. Like, is sales tax active? Because I had the same issue with both. I want to detect these errors and not cause my client to get unexpected results.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
You're not going to throw an error I need to. So it's it'd be something to look into.
Yep, I've got them written down to check into. It'll be interesting. Little tidbits.
That's all I had. Well, thank you.
No, thank you.
Well, it seems like we run out of attendees.
I've promoted everybody to a panelist.
Oh, the only one I see left is Leonard now. He doesn't have any questions.
Yes. Okay. Looks like we're pretty much done then. So let's call it a wrap. Thank you, Docs team, for joining us today. I think we've had a really great session. And thank you everybody who joined in today. And we'll see everybody next time.
Thank you, guys.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.